Call to order let's see, so I can see what the date is. The February 6th, 2024 regular meeting of the Board of Trustees. Would you all please stand for the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Moving on to agenda item 1.2, our land acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the College of the Redwoods is located on the unceded territory of the Wiyot, Hupa, Karuk, Matole, Tolowa, Wailaki, and Yurok people, where they have resided for time immemorial. We encourage all to gain a deeper understanding of their history and thriving culture. As an expression of our gratitude, we are genuinely committed to developing trusting, reciprocal, and long-lasting partnerships with the Wiyot people, as well as all of our neighboring tribes. Moving on to agenda item 2.1, I appoint trustees the ad hoc bond vendor committee. I will be appointing Trustee Biggin, Trustee Matthews, and Trustee Dorn to this committee. And the committee will be charged with consulting with the president on bond measure efforts, specifically public outreach and education through the exploration of viability phase through and on to a potential campaign phase.
Perfect. Thank you.
And moving on to agenda item 3.1. General public comments. Do we have any comments?
There are no comments.
Great, thank you. Agenda item 3.2, member comments. Trustee Biggin and then Trustee Pedravi.
Well, since our last board meeting, I listened into the government relations Zoom meeting, and they really emphasized the deficit that lies ahead for community colleges and many departments. What was interesting, though, is that the LAO, which is the Legislative Analyst Office, has a difference of opinion from the Department of Finance. So I'm not sure which one is the most reliable, but obviously, you know, we need to be watching the future based on the deficit we're projecting. Then I listened to the Board of Governors meeting, and they had a number of presentations, and of interest to me was a panel on rising scholars. They gave probably a little bit of credit for being one of the initial participants. They had three districts there that talked about their programs. One was Southwestern College, then Columbia College, which is part of the Yosemite School District, the Community College District, and then also a school in Kern County. They were also talking about their transition programs to OPAs too. So it was nice to recognize that CR has been responsible for that. Another presentation was their second session on
Generative.
Yeah, and they're spending, I think, 3 different meetings to help their trustees or their board members have a better understanding of the impact on community colleges. And I thought what was interesting too is the interest that they have in visiting various school districts, and this once a year they choose a community college district to have their meeting at, and this next district they'll be using the San Bernardino school district. The last Zoom meeting I listened to was offered through EdSource, and it was on why superintendents are leaving their positions. It was mostly about K-12 districts, though, so you know there's some different dynamics there, but a big part of it is the shortage of staff. You know, finding qualified certificate staff. Also, trustee elections have become more and more political. Politics affect the board meetings and the community input can be quite controversial. And that nowadays for superintendents, they need to be more than just an instructional leader. You know, they need to be able to engage communities and build social capital so that they can continue with an issue of trust. I thought that was of interest.
Thank you.
That's it.
Trustee Pedrati.
I also listened to the January 16th League's monthly government relations webinar, and there was 2 key takeaways for nursing: an increase of 60 million one-time Prop 98 funds to expand nursing programs and Bachelor of Science in Nursing partnerships to develop students and maintain the next generation of registered nurses through the community college system. And also newly introduced legislation, SB 895, authorizes bachelorette. Sorry, I watched it last night.
Wow.
I normally don't cover it's on TV. Baccalaureate degrees in nursing programs of 15 community colleges selected by the community college chancellors. The programs must have equitable access throughout the state, northern, central, and southern parts of the state, and priority must be given to districts in underserved nursing areas. This actually would sunset in January 2031. Mm-hmm. And also they did talk about the school faculty program, facility program. The Facilities Bond Act of 2016 is depleted. They expect to reach agreement on a bond proposal to be considered for the November 2024 election, K through 12 and community colleges.
Thank you. I also have comments. I attended the CCLC Effective Trusteeship and Board Chair Workshop 2 weeks ago in Sacramento. I had attended that last year in preparation for moving into the seat potentially. I did find this year that I got so much out of it now that I'm in that seat, and there were some high points or highlights that really resonated with me in terms of, as you were saying, the increased globalization of boards. And so there are many sort of leadership strategies that were shared with all of the chairs that were in the room, and also some strategies on dealing with complicated or sticky issues. And so it really, attending that workshop in particular, I think really helped me to gain some tools that will, not that this is a very highly political board, but and I was actually quite thankful for that in comparison. But just as I sit in my seat and think about and work towards facilitating our undertakings in the best way that I can. And so I did, as I said, write a written report, and it's attached to the agenda. Moving on to 3.3, board committee reports. Do you have any board committee reports?
Exactly.
Okay.
I wasn't sure who was going to give it. It's just an update on the ad hoc committee to evaluate the president. Members of that committee are Richard Jordan, Sally Wiggin, and myself. Richard is going to assume the chair position. Last year, the committee, I was a member of the committee last year, did redesign the survey instrument to evaluate the president that we distributed to staff administrators. And we were pleased with the how that was received and the feedback we got from it, or I should say, received from it. This year, we've decided to revisit the survey instrument that's used by trustees. So we will be looking at that, coming up with a possible different type of survey instrument that, of course, we will be discussing with President Flamer. We have a tentative meeting with President Flamer, just a short update meeting. After our workshop in March, that Saturday. Well, just to let him know where we are in terms of redesigning a survey and to share whatever we have at that point. But we're very much on schedule. We won't actually be rolling anything out until later.
Okay. Any other reports? I have one for the Ad Hoc Advocacy Committee, which is composed of myself, Trustee Pedrati, and Trustee Kelly. We met for the first time last week on Wednesday, the 31st. I agreed to serve as the chair of the committee. We discussed our committee goals for 2024, and they are to include monitoring and disseminating information to the rest of the board regarding state and federal budget and legislative matters that are of interest to or have the potential to impact the district. We will also support, as appropriate, the district's bond measure efforts. So in support of the committee's first goal, we've included in the agenda this month the CCLC state and federal budget and legislative priorities for 2024. And these include amending the 1961 era 50% law, as well as advocating for affordable housing and Cal Grant reform funding. The League also supports a school facilities bond, for instance, AB 247, and supports SB 895, which authorizes a pilot program on Bachelor of Science and Nursing degrees, not bachelorettes, at community colleges. Next. No, wait, that might be next. Moving on to the status of Board of Trustees requests. Do you have any updates? Are there any questions or comments on these? All right. Agenda item 3.5, trustee interactions with employees and constituent groups. And so I actually asked for this to be agendized, and so I wanted to maybe frame it slightly before we get into the discussion. And so the impetus was in the November meeting, CRFO President Haggerty's report. And what she discussed in that report, CRFO's desire to build community and specifically to sponsor interactions between board members and faculty. And so thinking about it and how that might align with our 2023-24 board goals, and the goal specifically 4D, which is to cultivate community by inviting and carefully considering the input of students, faculty, and staff. I feel like it's really important for us to have a discussion about sort of what are the rules that guide our engagement, what are best practices, what have been the past practices and experiences. And I find, especially for myself, as one of the newer members on the board, I am not entirely certain always how to navigate engagement. And so I'd really like to hear from my more experienced colleagues, as well as my colleague that has been a member of the district for a long period of time, kind of their perspective. So that said, I'd like to open for discussion and hear what you have to say.
May I just say something at the start of all
Yes.
this? My understanding was, as I'm recalling, I know you mentioned this came to your mind, not your mind, but recognition in November, but was the trustee Jordan there to agendize this? And if so, I'm just wondering, because those trustees Dorn and trustee Kelly are not here today, if we might want to have a discussion when one or both of them, I don't know, it's just, I didn't realize they weren't going to be here today, and it's just,
yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to second that observation, because both of them have some unique perspectives to bring to the discussion. So I think it would be more fruitful if we had them here when we have this item to discuss.
Well, I really appreciate both of you stating that, and I had a thought about that. And So you bringing it to me, again, I very much appreciate. And so are we all in agreement? Because I do think that this is a discussion that really warrants the engagement of the entire board. And so maybe we can move it to our March agenda. Great, so let's go ahead and do that. So moving on to 3.6, approved trustee travel for 2024 CCCCO, that is a lot of C's, trustee welcome, meeting for California students and communities, which is held in Sacramento, California.
I'm okay.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we have approved to travel. Moving on to agenda item 4, our consent calendar items. Would anybody like to pull an item from the consent calendar?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
All right. All of those in favor of approving the consent calendar?
Aye.
All of those opposed? Say no. Any abstentions? All right, the consent calendar has been approved. We're flying through this. Moving on to agenda item 5.1. Approve the monthly financial status report.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Would anybody like to add any notes or any questions?
I don't have anything to add, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Okay. All those in favor of approving the monthly financial status report, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the monthly financial status report is approved. Moving on to 5.2, approve the quarterly financial status report. Again, do you have any questions? Oh, I'm sorry, we have a motion.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Now, do you have any questions or is there anything that's you want to add?
I just want to call your attention to the two things that we see as challenging. Again, to increase the FTS to the 2019 level. We are close, but it's imperative that we pick up another 300 FTS this next year. But also, as Trustee Biggin noted, that there's still some question on the $38 billion deficit in the state and how that will affect us. So that's still a question. But I did want to point out those two challenges that we have lived with every single day for a while. But anyway, just moving forward, it's going to be
just a quick response. I could agree with you more, and I was really pleased it's a later agenda item to see our snapshot of the moment, because that's very encouraging. I really like the way that curve is moving up. So very optimistic that we will get that 300. That we need to get.
I have a question. Is there a cushion? Is there a hold harmless cushion there?
hold harmless cushion. What does that mean?
So I know we need to reach the 2019 levels, but is there a percentage difference there that it might be okay to?
No, we have to get 3801.
Oh, that's very specific.
That is our goal. 3801 is the goal. Okay. If we overreach and get 3802 or above, that will be very good.
And 38 flat?
No, our goal is 3801. Yes, but anyway, if we don't get that 3801, then our revenue would potentially be affected, because that would become our new floor. Okay. And then if we grow even further, then the danger that we will face is we'll pick up too many FTEs and we won't get funding for that, especially if there's no growth on the data from the state. So we're pretty hyper-focused on 3801.
If it's only 3,800, we call grandparents to enroll.
I don't know how to respond to that, Judge. You don't say.
Doesn't our hold harmless goes away at that point.
Yes, you're right, it does, and that becomes, that
That's-
3-year average becomes the new
yeah,
four.
right.
All right, go ahead and vote. All those in favor of approving the quarterly financial status report, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Right, the quarterly financial status report is approved. Moving on to 5 points, the first read of board policies and administrative procedures. Are there any?
We move to approve.
It's a-
Oh,
it's a-
information.
Yes, Trustee Muller.
Yeah, I have a comment on AP 7120. The recruitment and hiring of management and administrators. So in terms of the screening committee composition, that would be item number 3 for the group of administrators who we may be searching for. First of all, I think it's a very large screening committee, but that is what it is. What I'm questioning is when you go through the entire document, the CHRO plays a fairly prominent role, and which is appropriate. But if the position that's being searched is the CHRO, it seems to me there should be some other person designated in the event that the CHRO is also on the position.
Let me get down there exactly.
Okay, so
Trying to follow exactly where you're coming.
Number 3.
well, it's
I see 3A.
the CHRO is mentioned several times in terms of that person's support of the screening committee and deliberations, which is, as I say, appropriate. But I just question whether there should be some backup in the event that the search is for a CHRO and the current CHRO is in a different position.
Yes, so we have someone from that office who serves as the EO for that.
Well, the CHRO has more responsibility that goes beyond when you said the EO, you're talking about the EEO.
Who's part of the committee.
Yeah.
Yes.
So are you saying that that person would then have the responsibility that the CHRO has throughout this document?
Well, the CHRO doesn't have the responsibility within each screening committee. It's that someone from that office who's selected by the CHRO or myself to serve as the EO for that particular committee. So the chief HR officer doesn't actually serve in the committee unless selected to.
Yeah, I recognize that.
Okay.
But that person serves as a support person for the screening committee. And there's
Actually,
Let's say,
it does not.
or designee. Is that?
okay. I mean, since we're in that section, because it appears several places, and I should have highlighted it. Like we're in selection of finalists. Let's say, just looking at E, there's one. After discussion with the committee, the CHRO will present the list of the finalists to the president superintendent for selection.
Yes.
I mean,
now I understand the question.
that is scattered throughout this.
Correct. So in this case, because I am chair of that committee, so I work directly with the EO for that committee to make sure that the finalists get to my position.
Yeah.
So the CRC, so the chief HR officer is not involved.
But should we spell it out so that it looks clean, like?
I can most certainly take a look at that.
Would adding or designate be sufficient? On E, on it?
Well, I
section E.
and I hear what you're saying, Trustee Mullery, even if it's the CHRO designee, if they're the one that is applying for the job and that is compromises their ability to objectively appoint a designee. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, yeah, go ahead.
No. I was just gonna note that in at least one place it says or designee, and can't that be part of it? And then, yeah, is it President Flamer who's choosing the designee or, okay, so maybe adding that as, maybe it would work to add that in the places where Trustee Mullery is concerned, so
Certainly.
it's just spelled out as or designate.
I'll go ahead and I'll take that back and take another look.
And I see that it's in selection of candidates for interview, selection of plans throughout the document.
It's in several places, and it doesn't say in most of the places designate, just says CHRO.
Or in the case for.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I could see that.
See like one kind of sentence at the top in the event, you know, that.
I think it should say in the event of if the CHRO is applying. You know, it should be specific, I think.
Yeah. It could even just simply say if there's any potential conflict of interest or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be prudent to be clear on this.
Okay. Thank you for the feedback.
Trustee Matthews.
I had another question. I think this is stated in other policies, but one of the things that we have talked about, I know that the equal opportunity diversity representative is there and is that voice, but there isn't anything in this particular policy, which is talking about procedure, I understand, that references the goal of diversity in hiring. And I don't know if, you know, that should be stated. I realize this is a policy about, it's an AP and it's about procedure, but
if it's okay, I will go ahead and make some changes based on the board's comments in terms of process and procedure. And I'll go back and look at the board policy and see if we can revise it. And I'll bring the board policy as a draft in school days.
Yeah, my comment would be, is it possible to check some of the recent publications from ACRO, which is the official professional organization of HR administrators? Because I know they've really been looking at adding that kind of language that Trustee Matthews is talking about into documents, and they come up with a kit or that, I mean, they've come up with recommendations. And HR office may have copies of that because it is a professional publication out there. So it's been out for at least a year, I believe.
Trustee Mullery.
I just wanted to mention again the size of the screening committee, specifically for the top tier. There will be, according to this layout, 4 managers or administrative representatives of the committee. And clearly this is your call, President Flamer. It just seems like a very large committee. And I just wonder, does it need to be that much?
I expected that as well.
Yeah.
No, and actually we talked about that in other venues, that this is pretty large as well.
Looks like you get to 12 people.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And perhaps this was written at the time when this district had a lot of management people. You know, we had presidents at each college, vice presidents at each campus, and we had vice presidents more, you know, so many more management staff than we have now. We've become a leaner machine, I think, in terms of management. So probably it is a little overkill to have 3 It's coming back to me, it's 4.
Actually,
Yeah.
there are 4, we can put that in half if we need to as well, so I will take this up.
Any other questions or comments on any of the other policies? Moving on to 5.4, authorized sale of construction technology house number 47, 1670 Albert Avenue, Eureka, California, 95503, with a $300,000 listing price, and authorize the president superintendent to accept a reasonable offer and to execute the required documents.
I move to approve.
Second.
Have any questions or discussion?
Congratulations on having one to sell.
Indeed, yes.
All right, all of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Any abstentions? Okay. The authorization of the sale is approved. Moving on to informational reports, 6.1, recognitions.
Thank you. I really enjoy adding folks to here, but first of all, we have two student athletes that we wanted to recognize. But also I want to call attention to our 2 staff in Del Norte, who has just been phenomenal workers in trying to keep the place together and making sure that the classrooms not only are clean, but are places where our students and faculty like to go. And we all know that the Del Norte campus is dated, and the work of our staff to make sure that things are working is just phenomenal. Especially now too, because of the rain. So we have leaky roofs, and they're scrambling to make sure that the offices are dry and students and staff have someplace to go.
Moving on to 6.2, snapshot of enrollment.
This is a pleasure to show you. Again, this is based on the actual 320 reports that we submit to state. And it's as Trustee said, this is our trend of going up is really nice, but also on the 23-24 numbers. Now that's based on a projected P1 report that we talked about before. And we had a little bit of drop on the P1 to about 35-10, maybe 35-01. So again, it's some little room there. But we're also now beginning to focus on fall of 24 and spring 25 class schedule. So we need again to pick up 300 FTS to make the target. And we are still focused on making sure we have enough sections to add to the next schedule to reach that. We're focusing on dual enrollment and prison education and any other areas that we see opportunities to go.
Thank you. This is very impressive. I found myself coming back to this many times because it is, speaking of 1,000 students, nearly 1,000 students is very significant. Okay, moving on to organizational reports. 7.1, Academic Senate, President Deanna Herrera.
Hello, board. I have so much to report, and I promise I'm going to try and keep it shorter than I usually do. But I just wanted to say we did have a couple meetings on January 19th on the same day. So we actually had our regular Senate meeting, and then after that we had a Senate retreat. And at the Senate meeting, we had invited a couple of the vice presidents to come and report. And so one of those were Crystal Morse, Dr. Morse, to talk about some of the student services that are available. That, of course, we already had obtained lots of information through emails and that kind of thing, but it was really important to be able to have faculty ask questions and get up to date and that kind of thing with the most recent information. And part of this was to help us meet one of our goals, which is to create better wraparound experiences for our students. And also at ASCCC, it has been acknowledged that community college students, by and large, have been experiencing lots of different crises ever since the times, it seems so long ago now, but really COVID and all of the lockdown experiences really weren't that, long ago. And so our students are still having some responses to that. And so part of our work too, and as faculty, is to make sure that our students are connected with the supports they need to do their best in their academics. So that was really helpful, and we very much appreciate Dr. Morse coming and speaking to the Senate about all those availabilities. And if a crisis should occur, the faculty know exactly what they need to do. So that was really helpful. We also had Julia Morrison, Vice President, talk about audits with Levi Gill. And that was really interesting, a very in-depth report. And I think it's important because faculty need to know how their programs might be audited and what those audits could be used for, what they entail, and how faculty can support that process too. And psychology was actually used as an example audit. So that was quite eye-opening and very interesting, given that I am a psychology professor. So we also really have been working in the Senate, as well as the CRFO has, on building community. So this is one of the reasons why we're bringing in leaders of different units, just to kind of create that sense of open communication that's so important, so that we can effectively engage and work together. So that was really the focus on the 19th. And after that meeting, we had our Senate retreat. So the Senate retreat focus was also on communication and creating an environment whereby all senators feel that they are authorized to speak in an atmosphere of respect. And this was really in service of another goal of the Senate, which is to focus on inclusivity and accessibility in not only how we interface with our students and the district in general, but within the Senate itself, so that we could support shared governance. Because when senators are communicating and communicating openly and respectfully, this is how we create true democratic process in the Senate. So this was one of the reasons for that retreat. And so one of the things that we focused on was creating a set of norms that we began in the fall during that retreat, and built upon building those norms for how we expect to be treated in the Senate, what are norms in terms of communications that we all agree upon, and that kind of thing. So this list of norms will actually be provided on our Senate website. And shout out to Rachel Wars, who is always such a great support of these activities and will be doing this for us. So thanks ahead of time, Rachel. And also what we focused on is the area of inclusivity. That for me, as a Senate president, feels like this is within the realm of the leadership, is to create opportunities where faculty can feel that they are heard, that they have a safe place to share their opinions, and that we don't always have to agree. And so we looked at some pressures in, what's called normative social influence in groups, and also implicit and explicit bias, and how when we become aware of our own behaviors and our own communications, and how sometimes we're not always aware of what is driving those communications, and just to take a closer look at that area, so that especially, when we think of new faculty and students and this kind of thing, so that everyone feels like they have an important place at this table in shared governance. These elements were really, I think, important to look at. So we took some time to talk about this and to explore these ideas. And it was kind of a little mini diversity training for senators. So it was really wonderful. And I just appreciate the senators so much and their willingness to be open and honest with each other about how we can increase communications that also facilitate and foster shared governance, and use this as a model for how we communicate in other committees that we're on. So that was on the retreat side. And we also revisited some of our Senate goals. So I'll just briefly mention these. One of them, again, is to engage in activities to increase accessibility and also promote inclusion, to create better wraparound experiences for students, and to review 10+1 and shared governance application. Another one is to elevate the voice of the faculty in shared governance and to have robust discussions of guided pathways. And the last is to be fully engaged in strategic planning so that the faculty are, sharing in the workload to make sure that our plans are being engaged, and also to provide some consultation in terms of how our planning could be slightly more integrated across all committees and that kind of thing. So those are our goals. We also had, I don't want to go too much into this just in terms of the Brown Act, but I did mention it in the report, but it was at the time before we actually met in the Senate, so I don't want to go into detail beyond that, what was provided in the report. But we did discuss a couple of resolutions, and these resolutions have, I would say, 3 different objectives. One objective is to really kind of focus on the elements in those different resolutions. Another one was to obtain more input, of course, from the Senate on those resolutions, have more discussion, make sure those discussions are transparent. And third is to clarify how the Senate communicates with the district in a way that is aligned with proper channels of communication, and ways that we can follow what decisions are made, what happens with those decisions, and so on, and track them. So I think the best way to obtain more information while still remaining within the confines of the Brown Act here would be to request that you take a look at the agenda from the Senate, if you haven't already, from February 2nd, and then also to take a look at the minutes if you're interested in looking at those resolutions. Okay, so does anybody have any questions or anything? All right.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Moving on to 7.2, CRFO President Michelle Haggerty.
Hello, good to see everybody. I'm glad to be here through Zoom. I provided a written report to you, just a couple of brief things. One, I want to express my excitement at those enrollment numbers. I think it's great that our numbers are going up so much, and I think we're really feeling it in the classes. I know my classes are really bursting, so that's great. I talked about in the report that the distance education article was negotiated, so we're pretty happy to have that completed. And then this last week, the negotiation team agreed to go back to interest-based bargaining. We had moved into positional to finish that article. So there is a training that's scheduled. And we've also talked about maybe doing some type of trust exercise in the team to really build that team into a group that can talk about some of the difficult issues they need to talk about while negotiating. And I think this is good campus-wide too. So just the interest-based bargaining process is really good with, like Dr. Herrera just said, with community building. So Any questions or comments for me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7.3, classified president Tammy Engman. It's on there. Tammy? You see her? No, her video's not on, but I can see her. Okay, well, maybe we'll move on if she unmutes and can come back to her. So moving on to 7.4, Management Council, President Erica Barber. Is Erica there? She's not. Okay. Moving on to 7.5, Student Trustees, Will Godfrey.
I didn't have a written report this time, as AACR hasn't actually had a meeting since last semester. We had a retreat plan to start 4 meetings for last weekend, but unfortunately had to cancel due to illness. So I have that planned for this next weekend, and after that, we'll resume our regular meetings time.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 8, administrative reports. 8.1, President Superintendent report.
Thank you very much. We have, as we saw in fall semester, our dorms are over capacity, which means we don't have enough capacity for the enrollment growth, which is a great problem to have. And I want to thank Bear River again for taking our overflow this semester. I believe we have between 7 and 10 students staying in the casino. I should say staying at Bear River. And so they have been absolutely wonderful to work with. I also want to mention the fact that I went to Mike McGuire's swearing in the 49th Senate Pro Tempore yesterday, and it was wonderful. It was nice to see so many people of his colleagues stand up and support him. And you can tell that he has so much energy that people recognize that he cannot sit still, and he's always out there. So it was a pleasure, and also his address. I didn't know what to expect, but it was so emotional, and you could tell that he has all of California in mind as he moves forward. So it was a wonderful event, and I could not speak more highly about McGuire. And I'm very, very proud that he is in our corner. So it was a wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to 8.2, Vice President of Instruction, Dr. Lisa Getchie.
Yes, hi. Thank you. I have submitted a written report that I'm happy to answer any questions about. But additionally, wanted to add just a couple of things to highlight the work that we're doing in DEIAA this semester and following up on some prior reports. For example, our Culturally Responsive Pedagogy Grant cohort working with USC kicks off next week. So this cohort is committed to the work of DEIAA, and they are invested in the next many Wednesday mornings in participating in that work as a class. And similarly, we are moving our work forward, as mentioned in prior reports, on zero textbook costs that will open doors for students and make it easier for them to move through their pathway without a lot of additional costs out of pocket. And the last and related item in this kind of umbrella of DEIA work is that we kick off next week with the kind of precursor meetings with the State Chancellor's Office for ACMM, which is the Accessibility Capability Maturity Model. The name is a mouthful, but really moving our campus toward accessibility in every aspect in terms of physical, digital accessibility, and a wide arena of accessibility considerations. And so that work with the State Chancellor's Office kicks off really next week with kind of our informational meetings, but they will be doing a site visit in April that will encompass a larger group of our stakeholders here at the campus.
Thank you. Your question?
I just wanted to comment on in your report, you have the beginning farmer climate resilient training program. And owning a ranch and having a carbon farm plan on our ranch, I've worked with some people listed here like Kate Howard and Jake Talvey, and I've noticed in our Cattlemen's magazine that farmers and ranchers are getting on board with the climate change and all of that. So it's just nice to see this, and that CR is recognizing that and bringing this group of people, because some of the people listed here do an amazing job with the climate change going on. So anyway, just a comment.
Thank you. And if they don't hear it directly from the board meeting, I'll make sure that your comments are passed along.
I have one quick question. DEIAA, what's the second N?
Accessibility.
What's the first thing?
Anti-racism.
Okay.
I did not.
It is continually evolving for sure, and that is kind of out of ASCCC and mirroring that work.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Question.
Yes.
I enjoyed reading about the Ag Field Day, and I wondered approximately how many students were able to participate.
It was over 100, somewhere between 100 and 150, depending on which report I got from whom, but it was in that range. It was over 100 students. And
there were 12 schools, according to your report, correct? Mm-hmm. Is that about what we had in the previous field day, or is this an increase?
You know, as I recall from last year, it's a slight increase, although I think this reflects last year's was quite successful as well. So I don't think it's leaps and bounds different, but I think we're certainly trending toward more participation. And this is it's a very popular and well-received event.
Yeah, I appreciate the district doing this event. I think it's important. I thought about the ag program today driving in when I saw these fields that were all flooded. I hope they fared not too poorly with this recent storm. I don't know.
That's where you're at. Some do better than others.
Thank you. Moving on to 8.3, Vice President of Administrative Services, Julia Morrison.
Thank you. I would like to add, as I speak, Leslie, Marshall, and Johanna Helser have been down north on the job walk for the Del Norte roof replacement and skylight repair. They did kind of shoot me a text to let me know that we did have one general contractor show up. So while that's not the greatest of news, it's good news in that we did have a company show up. So hopefully they will submit a response, which will be due on February 22nd, and then we can start moving forward with getting the leaks up in Del Norte addressed. And then other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about my report.
I just wanted to thank you for the report that you attached for the Employee Benefit Trust Fund. I found that important and useful to see that. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Moving on to 8.4, Vice President of Student Services, Dr. Crystal Morris.
I don't believe she's on today.
8.5, Interim Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives, Ms. Carrie Mayer.
I am happy to answer any questions that you might have about my report.
Any questions? Thank you for sharing it. It's quite disheartening.
I know. I tried to add a little golden window at the end, which is
a lot of work.
You know, we're trying to do what we can to help mitigate these situations. It's a big problem, and it's going to take all of us working on it. But I'm confident that we're headed in the right direction on these new program development efforts that we're engaged in, and that trying to expand the programs that we have that are helping to meet some of these needs. But it's kind of a stark report, so.
I did think it was interesting that the high school graduation rate, Humboldt has 87% versus the state at 84%. But college preparedness, UC, CSU requirements 29% versus California at 50%. bachelor's degree or higher, Humboldt 31.2, California 35.3. But those are interesting statistics. And so we have the higher graduation rates out of high school.
Yes. Yes. And hopefully some of our efforts around dual enrollment can help boost those, college readiness numbers. And I also think that there's a lot of opportunity for us, especially in the adult community ed space, to maybe develop some short-term programs to kind of help meet some of those, big issues around smoking cessation and prevention. And so I think it's just good. It's always good to have information about what the issues are in the community and where the needs might exist. So keep doing what we do.
Thank you. Yes.
I want to go back. No, think fast enough. I want to go back to Dr. Morris's report on the retention work. Just to comment that this is always an evolving process, but early alert, which what it used to be called, it's always been difficult to put in place and to make work. And I think this is one example where technology can really make this about easier but more effective. And so I think to have one link where faculty can go in order to try and catch students early, which is the point, and keep them in class and keep them, help them be successful. There's a history to getting to this point where we have something that can, I think, work much better than what we've been able to do in the past.
Thank you. And on that, looking at the range and specificity of the types of alerts, I really appreciated that. Any questions or any other comments for Interim Senior Vice President of Strategic Initiatives? Okay, we'll move on to 8.6, Executive Director of College Advancement and the Foundation. Ready to follow.
Good afternoon, trustees. In addition to my report, I would like to mention the fact that Matthew, hopefully say his last name correctly, Gilliland, who runs our Veterans Resource Center through his employee giving, has created a new endowed scholarship fund to benefit the Veterans Resource Center. So appreciate him putting that into place. And also I'd like to say we've finalized a date for the Floyd Fatiga Art Gallery dedication. It will be March 28th at 4 p.m. It's a Thursday. And we're sending out invitations to everyone that Trustee Pedrati and Trustee Vigan and our art department has identified as guests for the program. And we'll, of course, invite the General Sierra community as a whole. But looking forward to that. Do you have any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to agenda item 9. Future agenda items. 9.1. We have a trustee request to place an item on the future agenda. Are there any requests? Okay, moving on to agenda item 10, disclosure of items to be discussed in closed session. Closed session, there will be a conference with labor negotiator, employee organization, CRFO, Messelia Demti. And I will move into closed session now.
There were no public comments in closed session.
Oh, thank you.